Hello, everybody. I'm Julian Castro, the CEO of the Latino Community Foundation, and welcome to our Latino Power Fund Town Hall, a conversation with community leaders. This entire week, to mark the 100 days, the 100-day mark of the Trump administration, the Latino Community Foundation has been producing a series of activations that we've entitled 100 Days of Latino Resilience. We've done that to spotlight the impact of the policies of the Trump administration on the Latino community. A few weeks ago, I was in Redwood City, California, which is in the Bay Area, and I had the opportunity to attend a Know Your Rights session. This was a session that was organized by a nonprofit for the benefit of people who had questions on immigration law. People who thought that they might be subject to some of the new harsh enforcement of immigration laws from the Trump administration. And it was fascinating being in the room that day. Of course, people were very interested to hear what the law was and how they could be prepared for potential enforcement, how they could protect themselves and their family. There was a lot of anxiety and concern. And for me, it was a very, very powerful example of the role that nonprofits play in delivering information and resources to the community on the ground where they are when they need it. The Latino Community Foundation was created to support nonprofits throughout the state of California that are doing tremendously impactful work to serve Latinas and Latinos everywhere throughout the state. And over the last few years, we've actually supported about 300 nonprofits, the vast majority of which have also been Latina and Latino-led, that are working throughout California, not only on immigrant rights, but also on entrepreneurship and small business creation, on improving quality of life in different small and big cities. The conversation today is a conversation with a number of community leaders from some of those nonprofits that have been making a difference in their communities in so many different ways. I think you're in for a treat because they have the experience of years of serving the community, understanding it, being rooted in their communities, and also the experience of these last 100 days of the Trump administration. We're going to have a conversation today about what they're seeing and hearing out there, how these policies on immigration, on post cuts to the Department of Education, on entrepreneurship, changes in funding for things like CDFIs, on other cuts and policy changes, and in some cases also judicial rulings, are having an impact on the community. And also, importantly, we'll talk about what can be done. What role do you have out there? What role can you play if you're interested in being a part of making a difference also in the community? I just want to give a shout out and thank our team for producing this. I want to thank our board at the Latino Community Foundation. One of those board members that I'll introduce in just a second is actually part of our conversation today, and she heads up her own nonprofit. And I want to thank you for joining us. So let me go ahead and get started by introducing our panelists. The first panelist is Belinda Hernández Arriaga. Belinda is the executive director of ALAS, Ayudando, Latinos a Soñar, which serves the Half Moon Bay and San Mateo County area. And ALAS is a nationally recognized nonprofit that uplifts Latino farm worker families through cultural arts, mental health support, direct services, and community advocacy that's rooted in love and equity. Our second panelist is Cristina Tzintzún Ramirez. Cristina is also a member of the LCF board, and so we're excited to welcome her today. She's also the president and executive director of NextGen America. It's a national organization that is the nation's largest youth voter organization. Its mission is to empower young people to drive progressive change by mobilizing millions to vote. by advocating on key issues like climate, justice, and equality, and by building a government that reflects the power and diversity of a new generation of Americans. Our third panelist is Leo Murrieta. He's the director of Make the Road Nevada. Make the Road Nevada is a statewide organization in Nevada that empowers Latino and working class communities of color in the state through grassroots organizing, policy advocacy, and education to advance justice in areas like immigration, housing, health, and youth leadership. Our fourth panelist is Masih Fouladi. He's the executive director of the California Immigrant Policy Center, which is a statewide California organization that uplifts immigrant communities by transforming systems for racial, social, and economic justice, driving landmark policy wins through 25 years of statewide advocacy, coalition building, and leadership. And last but certainly not least, we have Vanessa Perez. Vanessa is the executive director of Time for Change Foundation, which works out of the San Bernardino County area. And Time for Change empowers communities toward economic prosperity and well-being through innovative projects focused on housing and economic development, while also fostering equitable and sustainable growth led by people of color. So I want to thank each and every one of you for making some time to join us today. I know that all of you are tremendously busy these days, as a lot of nonprofit leaders and team members are. And so I know how much it means for you to take a little bit of time out of your day and to join our Zoom today. Let me start off with a question for all of you. And Belinda, I'll start with you. Talk to us about how, like, there's no question, like these 100 days of the Trump administration have meant a drastic change in policy from the previous administration on immigration, on education, on housing, on healthcare, and so forth. And your organization, ALAS, works very close to the ground in community, especially with farm worker communities. How have the actions and the policies of the new administration affected the people that you work with and the work of your organization, of ALAS? And how have you had to pivot or adapt because of those changes?
Thank you so much, Julian. Thank you to everyone here today for this really important conversation. And it's necessary and timely. We woke up to the day after the inauguration to receiving a postcard at ALAS that actually was addressed to us. And on the front of the card, it said, "Trump is coming, pack your bags, get ready." And on the back, it had a whole litany of wording for deportation. We are going to find you. We are going to get you. We are going to deport undocumented folks. And in black and white, clear as day, it really struck a fear into us immediately after this inauguration of thinking, like, what is our country coming to? You know, we've been working for so many years building on love and hope and unity, and to find ourselves in this state, it's impacted the mental health of our community. And I think that's one thing I really want to stress. We're seeing the fear, we're seeing the anxiety, we're seeing depression, we're seeing isolation. And those are all mental health factors that I think are super important to address during this critical time. We're seeing the increased criminalization of our immigrant community in Half Moon Bay. With we did have the presence of CBP, and there was about 15 of them, and just the rapid fear that came out from the children to the elders and what they're living with, and folks going even into isolation has been really hard. And it's also increased a wave of our determination into activism and coming together and being there for the community. But at this time, we are seeing so much around the mental health impact of fear.
Thank you for that, Belinda. You know, you make just such an important point about just the human effect that all of the news that we hear and that's coming out of Washington has had, and especially on the most vulnerable communities. And Cristina, NextGen works on empowering youth and specifically ensuring that they show up at the ballot box and make their voice heard. I think about the last 100 days. I think about them turning back on student loan debt payments for young people. Think about the slashing of the Department of Education. Young people are being intimately affected by these policies. Just what are y'all seeing out there, and how are you having to adjust, or what kind of plans is the organization making in response?
Well, thank you, Julian, and the LCF staff for helping pull this together, and to all the other panelists. I think having a conversation where we can talk about these first 100 days and how they are directly impacting the Latino community is so important. When we talk about the Latino community, we have to talk about young people. You know, at NextGen, we organize across the country, but also do a lot of campus organizing. And when you mentioned the lifting of the pause on student debt repayment, which we know is going to impact millions of people that aren't necessarily going to be able to repay, and no plan to actually address the crisis of the cost and affordability of higher education, the gutting of the Department of Education, and the rollback on the gains for the climate crisis that our organization and many others fought for. And we've seen an assault not just on those policy wins that have happened over time to uplift the education and the environmental impacts of our community, but also we have seen a direct assault on students across the country and their institutions, attacks on universities and students on their First Amendment rights to protest. And we've also seen attacks on the Latino community. And, you know, I think it's important, and I know that we are all thoughtful about this, that as Latinos, we are disproportionately impacted by immigration, but we are the one ethnic group in the United States that lives at a duality. As yes, many in our community are newly arrived, but we have also lived in these lands before the United States was even a construct or an idea. And so the level of fear that we see at our organization across the country from Latinos, you know, we work in Texas, where half of the people turning 18 in our state are Latino. The level of fear that people feel right now to exercise their rights, to even protest and push back, I think is something that we have to break through for our community. And I think that that's a really critical role that we have to play, is both to protect and empower our community in a time when they are directly confronting real challenges and assaults. So at our organization, how we're really thinking about adapting to this moment was, of course, for us, voting isn't the only way you make change, but we always say it's the most basic thing you must do, not the only thing you should do. We have many tools and many powers, and we also, right now, we don't always have to look to the federal government or the president. Yes, it's the most visible form of government, but we have state and local government, and many elections happening across the country right now. We're organizing in Pennsylvania for upcoming Supreme Court races. We're organizing in Virginia for the upcoming state race there, in Texas for local municipal races. There is so much happening, and we have to remember that we do have a lot of control, especially as Latinos, in state and local government, even as we try and push back on the attacks that are happening against our community. And so I just am really grateful to be having this conversation with other people that are organizing, that are doing that, yes, defend and empower our community to fight back.
No, thanks, Cristina. Yeah, you know, one of the things I remember about the first Trump term was just how much energy and enthusiasm and pushback there was from young people. And while I think I think you can generally say it's been true in this term that it's been a slower roll, so to speak, you do see that picking up. And the work of organizing is so crucial to keep people informed and to get them mobilized. And as you say, to make a difference, not only in federal elections, but also in state and local elections that are going on in 2026. And then, of course, a lot of municipal elections going on this year in 2025. Want to bring in Leo Murrieta from Make the Road Nevada. Just a side note here, Leo, the Latino Community Foundation, steeped in California, that is our history. But as of last year, we started making civic engagement investments to grantees in Nevada and in Arizona, and proud to support the work of Make the Road Nevada there. When I think of Nevada and the work that y'all do, obviously huge immigrant community there, Latino immigrants, Asian American immigrants, very diverse. And on top of that, constantly in the spotlight because it's a swing state and so forth. But it also just generally has a huge Latino community. What are y'all seeing on the ground in your work? And what pivots or adjustments are you making during these first 100 days of the administration?
Yeah, well, first, I want to thank you, Julian. We always love having you out in Vegas. And I also want to thank the LCF team and everyone for being a part of this and for the invite. Our work, it's been pretty intense. We are a battleground. We've seen a lot of changes in our communities. There's a lot of fear that's currently happening within our undocumented communities, our immigrant communities. And Make the Road, we have really had to shift what we do and how we respond in this moment. And so some of the things that we've done, we actually wanted to make sure that if in case someone gets caught up in the worst case scenario, right, like they get caught up in deportation proceedings, that they're not having to think on the fly in the hot seat about where are my kids, who's going to take care of them, where are my documentation for my immigration case, who's going to take care of my pet, where are my bank accounts. All of this information is massively important if you are caught up in deportation proceedings. And so at Make the Road, we created what we call a family preparedness plan. Literally the day after the election, we started putting this out to our membership and starting to have folks really prepare and think about how they can really guard themselves, their children, their families, their assets. And to date, we've helped hundreds of people fill out their family preparedness plans, our staff también. This is critically important. But in addition to that, we've also been doing large scale know your rights efforts. We've been riding the bus lines. We've been going out to the stores, the churches, everywhere we can with our team to safely get out there and pass out know your rights cards, make sure that our gente understand what they can do if they find themselves in emergencies like immigration actions. And then also we hired an immigration attorney, right? Like times are tough and we want to make sure that all of our rights are protected. And we're thankful because this is important for us to be able to continue exercising our rights as a nonprofit, to continue educating and forming the community and making sure that us as an organization are protected as well as our members when they need us. But then also we're part of a statewide collaborative called the Nevada Immigrant Coalition. And we really couldn't do our work without our partners all across the state who have been launching large scale know your rights protection work, really helping to inform the community. And we're a part of that effort, but it's been a lot to do in a little over 100 days.
Yeah, no, I love the work that you're talking about and some of the adjustments that y'all have made, doing both large scale know your rights sessions. And then also you talked about going directly where people are into churches and stores. I've always been a big fan of organizations that are out there, going to the bus stops, going to events, talking to people where they're at and not waiting for people to come to them. And you also mentioned, hiring an immigration attorney, right? But doing what you need to do as an organization to get information to people where they're at and how they need it. And that's also a lot of in the same vein. I know, Masih, that the California Immigrant Policy Center works on also at a statewide level in California on policy. Recently, some of the LCF team and I were in Sacramento as y'all headed up an Immigrant Day of Action to press on the legislature and the governor to ensure that immigration services and advocacy is well resourced, and that the community, the most vulnerable of them, are protected and have what they need during this time. Talk to us about that work and some of the adjustments that y'all are making.
Thank you, Julian, and the LCF team for having us here today. And before I get started, I just want to give a shout out to all the workers who are out on the streets today commemorating May Day, International Workers' Day. I know a lot of our teams are probably out in protest today, and just want to show solidarity to them. And I think really, as we see these attacks on the immigrant population, on the Latino population, whether it's threats and execution of mass arrest, detention, wrongful deportation, really doing everything to take away the legal pathways to citizenship here in the US and in California for the California population that we represent. We've seen how important it is to come together. And so Immigrant Day of Action was a huge example of that. We held a conference the day before our Advocacy Day. It was packed, it was sold out, had to turn away more than 300 people just because we didn't have capacity to turn out. And then on the day of the Advocacy Day, we had 1,400 people come out. We were so thankful for you being there as our keynote. And that's the largest number that we've ever had in our 29 years of existing as a California immigrant population. And it speaks to what people are feeling at this time, the fear that they're feeling, but also the desire to push back and know that the only way to get through this is to come together. And so that's really what keeps us going as we see the various attacks that are impacting the Latino community here, the immigrant community. I think we always want to remind our lawmakers that 40% of California is Latino, with close to 16 million individuals. 30% of California is immigrant, with close to 10.6 million immigrants. And we are a long, long way from being equitable in the way that we are treating Latinos and immigrants in California. And so the push continues. And when these attacks come, we have to be brave. Our lawmakers have to be brave. And we want to remind them of that, because there's constantly change in the legislature, but the needs of our communities are something that will exist beyond us. And so that's really what we're trying to point out, whether it's protecting the inclusion of immigrants into Medi-Cal, or making sure that the rights of workers are protected, making sure legal services are available as communities are facing threats of deportation. All of those things are the things that we continue to push our lawmakers at the state level.
Thank you for that. And I know there is a lot to work on when it comes to those issues. And I was impressed with the energy, with the specificity that day, and just with the diverse array of support that you had from a number of organizations, including a lot of labor support. I saw SEIU out there. And so there's quite a bit of coalition building also that has been there for a while. This is not new, but has really been energized in these 100 days. So thank you for that, Masih. And Vanessa, had a chance to visit Time for Change Foundation about, I guess, a year or so ago in San Bernardino. Y'all are both in an area of the state that is not the big city, right? Not Los Angeles, not San Francisco or San Diego, but where there is both a huge Latino population and a lot of need, and where your focus is on issues like economic prosperity, entrepreneurship, and housing.
Yes.
Because all of that intimately impacts quality of life, especially for the most vulnerable. What are you seeing right now compared to a year ago, let's say, and what adjustments or pivots are y'all making as an organization?
Yeah, thank you, Julian, and thank you, LCF, for hosting this and just welcoming Time for Change Foundation to be a part of it. It's definitely an honor to be on here today and just to have this conversation 100 days in, right? And so I think one thing that is important to note is that Time for Change Foundation, we've actually been in existence for 23 years, providing housing and supportive services to the unhoused, predominantly women with children, and now men. Many of those have been formerly incarcerated and just have histories of violence, trauma, substance abuse, and a lot of different things that have prevented them from being able to maintain self-sufficiency. And when you visited, Julian, you came to our Black and Brown Opportunities for Profit Center. And so one of the things that, we have noticed and have seen, even coming out of COVID and a lot of, the social unrest and civil unrest with what has happened, even with George Floyd and things of that such, is that the Black and Brown community is always the one that is on the front line taking care of our communities, and yet being in lack and being the last at the table, right? And so you mentioned us being in San Bernardino, which is a city that has historically been known for poverty and substance abuse. We have been named second in nation in poverty, and so traditionally underfunded in this region as well. So it's very clear to point out that one of the biggest shifts and changes and important things where there is a lack and a need is budget cuts. Just shortly after inauguration, we're getting emails from several federal funders that we at Time for Change Foundation have, just in notifying us that there is a pause on federal funding and pause on federal projects. And so some of these federal dollars impact the work that we're doing here in our community, especially in the Latino communities, because that is who we predominantly serve. And so some of these budget cuts have caused a little bit of uneasiness and fear in how are we going to be able to move forward with some of these projects. One in particular provides permanent supportive housing to 10 chronically homeless families. How are you going to just stop the rent for families who have traditionally been chronically homeless, which means that this is a hard to house population, right? We're hearing about cuts in other areas of funding through Department of Justice, MBDA, and so if you mentioned a year ago what things were looking like, and so a year ago we're seeing tons of opportunity where MBDA is Minority Business Development Agency, so that supports funding and opportunities for small businesses. So aside from the Time for Change Foundation, a few years ago we opened up the Bebop Center, which is an economic hub that supports women of color entrepreneurs. So we know that we have to help our community advance in their economic development and just increase and advance in their socioeconomic status through ways that are going to be innovative and not traditional jobs and careers. And so entrepreneurship has been a key piece in us teaching these women how to have successful businesses and how to build generational wealth. And so when we're hearing about these budget cuts, that puts this thought and idea of, are we going to be able to continue this programming, right? And so, not only just for us as an organization, but we're hearing from people in the community because, we're dealing with people that are unhoused and have histories of incarceration and substance abuse and trauma. But then we're dealing with our business communities who are wondering how they're going to be able to continue developing products if they're partnering with different businesses overseas that provide components of the products that they're making. Now, people overseas are not wanting to do business with us because of tariff increases and things of that sort. I'm having conversations with, friends and family in the community who are experiencing loss in retirement accounts and a lot of things affecting people's finances and income, which is already, such a predominant issue in our region because it's traditionally known of being low in poverty and having lack of funding and support. And so I think, one of the biggest things is seeing the cuts and the losses and, really just trying to pivot and see how are we going to be able to continue to support our community. And of course, we are a grassroots organization. We started on the ground, started with nothing, started with, our own money, our own investments, our own furniture, our own, all of these things. And I think one of the things that we have, not just pivoted during this time, but have always done is having diverse funding streams. And so, yes, we're seeing cuts in federal funding, but we know that we can't depend on one specific area for funding. And so I think that's definitely an important area and topic to discuss when you're talking about nonprofits, because we can't just depend on the government. We have to depend on other streams of funding, partners, foundations, events, fundraising events, individual donors, and just really just make sure that we continue to be diverse.
You bring up such a key point. We've heard at LCF about nonprofits that used to have government contracts that have been frozen, or this is the last one they're going to get, and that's a major part of their funding. Even in the philanthropic sector, given the entire climate, we've heard of a couple of instances of philanthropies that have backed off the funding, for instance, of racial justice and equity work. And that has an impact on the ability of nonprofits to provide services and opportunity for people. And I was so impressed when I visited the Bebop Center, had a chance actually to meet, I think, 8 or 9 Black and Latina women entrepreneurs that the Bebop Center had helped to launch their own business and find a market for it. Folks who were doing things like catering businesses. And I remember one of the women made soaps and perfumes. And so in a very real way, just not, just on a piece of paper, but in a real way, y'all have done such impressive work to connect people with opportunity and really to change their lives. So thank you for that, Vanessa. Want to go back to you, Belinda, and just ask all of y'all this question. It is said that in crisis that there is opportunity. And I want to talk about a little of that opportunity in a positive way and ask you, how do you think these threats to our communities have fueled movement building? And where does your community turn to for hope? And where can we see signs of strength and resistance that then can be built on for the future?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, we feel the love from LCF and from our leaders coming together to say, hey, we're here to partner. And this is a good example. Even just being here today as Medicina, we need to do more of that. But at ALAS, what we're really seeing is a lifting up of our Cultura Cura model. And that Cultura Cura is the power of our culture, our community, of coming together through the arts, through championing one another, because really at the end of the day, we have seen that it's all of us together that is going to push against, the hate backdrop, the rhetoric that we're hearing, the disparities that we're seeing. And that's providing all the way from the mental health and the emotional well-being to the basic needs and the care, and being able to give and elevate that family, that farm worker, with what they're needing. And so being really creative is important. So at ALAS, we've been able to increase our arts programming as a Cultura Cura model, and combining mental health and culture. We're seeing how we're taking the work out into the fields with our Equity Express bus, going out to the farms, taking the accordion. We're doing accordion classes with our farm workers to really help them to be able to have what we call this cultural sensory. When we look at how trauma affects communities, one of the things is we have to have a space to come up for air, to come up to breathe, to come up to find that hope. And so we are learning that through music, through guitar, through mariachi programs, through ballet folklorico, through poetry, through having our community build like spoken word. They're doing photo voice. They're telling their stories, their testimonials using the arts, but also we're bringing in research. And research is so important because at a very academic level, but a community grass level, we're creating the community advisory board that's telling the stories of our community. They're the ones that are able to share the work that's happening through their story and the need, and that's making it up into the community. And then we're advocating at all levels with our political leaders. We're meeting with leaders. We're meeting with our funders. We're meeting to share what's really happening on the ground. I can't help but tell a story right now of a special farm worker group that we meet with out on a farm, and they shared with us early on that they weren't going to come out during the weekend, that they weren't going to come out. in the evenings that they were going to stay there because they had so much fear around leaving. And so what we're seeing is we're going to them. We're bringing food out into our community. We're increasing our basic needs. We're also calling together our elders, our Corazones de Oro program. We can't forget about them because they also have the ripple effect of everything that they're hearing and seeing. Some are isolated, some are alone. And so bringing them in to celebrate one another has been really huge. And, just I think the hope has been coming from this joy that we see when we come together. And the hope in that our leaders like yourself, Julian, LCF, other funders are saying, hey, you know what? You're not alone. We're with you. We're being creative. And that has all brought a lot of hope in a time where we're saying, you know what, let's focus on what we can do. Let's focus on mobilizing. Let's focus on being creative. And let's use our cultural medicine, our cultural strengths of the community to lift each other up, be innovative, be powerful, and move against this backdrop and push through.
Yeah, culture, hope, self-determination, all of those things, so important right now. Thank you, Belinda. Cristina,
Yeah.
on your end.
Well, I just thank you, Belinda, for that. I think it's so true that culture is the cure for this moment, especially in the Latino community that's so under assault. And I think about two key things. One here at NextGen that we're seeing is that in this moment, when we see attacks coming against students, against trans folks, against immigrants, we can feel really divided. And that actually the cure in response to that is in strength is coalition partnerships. And that's when you start to feel in this moment how you can fight back. So it was amazing earlier last month when NextGen and many, many others, Move On, Working Families Party, Indivisible, SEIU, through the Fight Back table, a coalition of dozens of organizations helped organize the Hands Off rallies across the country. There were 1,200 events. Millions of Americans participated in every single state in the country, really saying hands off Social Security, hands off the Department of Education, hands off of immigrant and vulnerable communities. And I think that we're seeing a huge amount of fuel come out of that, of people volunteering, of people feeling energized. I think when we sit at home and we scroll through social media, we can feel so overwhelmed in this moment and with so many assaults. But getting out, connecting with others in person and volunteering, that is how we're going to find our footing and our way forward. And the other thing I want to say is that I think it's been a big surprise for a lot of people. We're at that 100-day marker. And I think especially on immigration, many of us on this call have worked to defend the rights of immigrants, people like my mother, over decades. And we have not seen, I do agree that we have a broken immigration system in this country, but I think most of all it's broken for undocumented immigrants. And that the only people that benefit from the broken system we have are big business that are able to squeeze and take advantage of the rights of undocumented immigrants. And as we've seen undocumented immigrants come under attack, one of the real points across the country of all types of political persuasion was that immigrants deserve due process, and that one of the lowest comments and points for the Trump administration was Kilmar Abrego Garcia's case. And I think that shows that when we don't back down, when we refuse to allow migrants in our community to be treated as second-class people and we defend their rights, we can actually win the narrative. And so I think that there is an opportunity to continue to push, not just on all sides of the political aisle, and demand that immigrants be treated with the respect and dignity we deserve. Because I think part of the reason that immigrants are treated this way is because people have not been willing to own and recognize and respect the contribution that immigrants give to this country, and instead allow the narrative to be controlled by a far right, racist, ascendant political agenda. So I feel a lot of hope that when we control and fight back, we can actually win. And so that's giving me hope, even as dark as it is in this moment for a lot of people in our community.
Yeah, Cristina, just two things there. Yeah, I think you're so right to point out in the case, especially of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, that people who may have different opinions on immigration have come together and say, hey, wait a minute, everybody deserves due process. And not only that, the Supreme Court has said that in the past. Of course, that's going to be litigated and so forth, is being litigated. There's that. And then there's also this collective hopefulness about an alternative and what we can become that people, I think, really have to hang on to, even when that anxiety, that fear, that sometimes sense of dread is out there. So thank you for that. Leo, how about on your end there in Nevada in terms of movement building? I mean, Nevada is a state, of course, we mentioned battleground state, considerably smaller than its neighboring state of California, but also a place that is diverse and has been very, very well organized in different ways for years. What opportunity is there for further movement building there in Nevada, and then that you see nationally? Because I know that Make the Road Nevada is part of a chapter of Make the Road organizations in a couple of other states.
Yeah, thank you so much. So Make the Road, we're active in 5 different states. We're the only ones out here on the West Coast, the best coast. We're in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania. Don't tell my coworkers I said that, pero está bueno. But the reality is, right, like out here on the PST, we have a lot of immigrant power, right? Like the future of our state is Latino, Latine, immigrant, it's our gente. And although, I've had a lot of good conversations with my members about, how are they getting by? How are they finding ways to find joy and happiness, even though it all feels crazy and it all feels impossible? I'm a person of privilege. I became a citizen in 2010. But I came from Sonora, Mexico, and I feel my roots, I feel my raíces deeply. And in conversations with my members, although this moment can be scary, this time that we find ourselves in, the threats against our families, our communities, the hope that folks find is in our blood, right? Like our ancestors have endured so much over the centuries of trying to be erased. They've tried to remove us from our homes. They've done this before. And still, nonetheless, our gente continue being in this country. We continue thriving. We continue organizing, advocating for our rights to improve our quality of life and the quality of life for all of our kiddos and future generations. And quite frankly, my members are still mobilizing to our state legislature, right? Like we still have a really proactive, immigrant-friendly agenda. We are doing our best to make sure that immigrants in our state are in the driver's seat, because progress comes from us. And when our gente thrive, the rest of our state prospers. So Nevada's fortunate to have such a dynamic, such a vibrant immigrant community of communities, because we have such a diverse array of voices and ancestors really driving this change. From the Ethiopians who have come here for generations to open businesses and make our commerce incredibly diverse, our food tastes delicious, our Filipinos, our Latinos from all over Latin America. The voices of immigrants and the impact of immigrants is really just undeniable in our state. We were super stoked this past year, even though the entire election didn't go as folks had wanted. We elected one of our own members to the state legislature, Assemblywoman Cynthia Moore. She became the first Mexican immigrant woman elected to the state legislature. It's incredible what our gente can do when we give them the opportunity to be seen as the experts, to be seen as the folks who have the answers. Because quite frankly, right, like our señoras, our señores, our gente are the ones that we should be turning to in times of crisis. Because the day after the election, when quite frankly, I had a lot of feelings, my members were the ones who told me to buck up, ¿verdad? They were the ones who put me in a reality check. Me dijeron, no hay de otra. Right? Because that's the truth. No hay de otra. We're not going anywhere. We have to find a way to overcome. We We have to find a way to persevere, y lo vamos a hacer juntos. So, yeah, there's a lot of hope to be had because we've got a lot of power to build.
That, one of the things you said about how much our ancestors have overcome, and the ancestors of people from different communities, right? I think about that a lot in this moment. And it also both gives me hope and then gives me determination that the people who made so many sacrifices to get here in the first place, what they overcame, how they supported our dreams, we owe them to stay in the fight and to keep going and to try and pass along the opportunities that we've had. I think it's something to remember all the time for this moment. Masih, the Immigrant Day of Action that you talked about a couple of weeks ago in Sacramento, I think and the coalition that was built for that, the coalition that y'all have been such a part of, was a great example of movement building. Where does that go from here? And how has it been affected by these 100 days, and what's the future of it?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it's important for folks to understand a lot of what went into Immigrant Day of Action and having close to 1,800 people there over 2 days actually started even before the election. So these threats that our communities were fearful of facing if Trump got elected, we wanted to make sure with all of California, with all of the diversity of the immigrant population here in California, to really take those things into consideration as we were coming up with a plan. And so we had 15 scenario planning sessions across the state. Over 500 individuals representing more than 260 organizations participated in those. And then after the election in December, we brought a couple hundred people together in Sacramento, again, to brainstorm, to finalize what our strategy was going to be as a part of the response. And in California, we had a special session specifically to make sure that our communities were prepared when the federal attacks came. And so as a part of that special session, we advocated for $25 million in funding for legal services that would go both towards immigration and civil legal services to make sure that not only the immigrant population, not only the Latino population, but other communities of color, the LGBT community, would be protected from federal attacks. And so that was all in the lead up to Immigrant Day of Action. And then we saw this historic turnout. And for us, it's really about continuing that fight. Right now, we're still in the first house of consideration for the statewide bills that we're pushing. And we know that once things move forward to the second house, we need to continue that energy. We're going to continue to take folks in Sacramento and around mass arrests, deportations, family separation, and even the stop work orders that we've seen at the federal level that are defunding a lot of the legal service organizations here in California. We have another ask of $60 million to continue to push for that. We know with everything that's happening around Medicare and funding at the federal level, how that could impact the continued inclusion of all Californians, regardless of status in Medi-Cal here in California. So we're pushing for that and making sure both congressionally within district meetings in California, in DC, but also with our state lawmakers, making sure we have contingency plans based on where the funding ends up at the federal level. And then some of the more recent attacks with IRS and the DHS potentially working together to really take advantage of undocumented individuals who have been paying their taxes, who have been doing their fair share, and wanting to turn that information over for deportations. We actually were working with Unidos and other organizations. We got 105 congressional members to sign on to a amicus brief to challenge that in the court. So I think our strategy has been, look, we know we are being attacked on so many fronts. The good thing is we've come together in advance of the election to figure out where these attacks would come, and we have formations to get into as a movement to push back. And that solidarity is going to be extremely crucial. And I think with what we've seen on college campuses, with visas being revoked, with green card holders like Mahmoud Khalil or Mohsen Madawi being attacked, that they're going to come for everyone eventually. And so as a movement, whether you're Latino, whether you're Muslim, whether you're Middle Eastern, South Asian, Asian Pacific Islander, like we need to come to this together. And that's what at the California Immigrant Policy Center, like we focus on. And the last thing I'll say is California has a lot of privilege. A lot of folks in California are privileged in that we have the infrastructure to support, but not all of California is the same. When you're talking about the Central Valley, and when you're talking about the Central Coast, when you're talking about the Inland Empire and San Bernardino, right? The resources that are in LA and the Bay Area are not there. And so as a movement, when we're coming together, we also have to be mindful not only of the ethnic diversity, but our regional diversity, and making sure we're uplifting the underserved regions all across California.
Thank you for making that point, Masih. It's such a crucial one of also being aware that there is need everywhere, but there are regions in California, in other states, where you don't have the resources, you don't have the investment in infrastructure, and there's a time to do everything that we can to correct that, to close that gap. It's right now when the need is so urgent. And Vanessa, there is, when we talk about creating housing opportunity, creating opportunities for entrepreneurship, there is a consistent, constant need for that, and especially among the most vulnerable. What does movement building, what does coalition building look like today, whether it involves pushing for legislation, more resources, more philanthropic dollars? Talk to us about that effort and how Time for Change is involved.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would say, what does that look like? I think one word comes to mind, and that's empowerment. And it's making sure that our communities feel empowered to use their voice to create change. Because I think, I was on a call the other day and we were talking about some of the federal funding things, and we are explicit in who we serve and in our population that we serve. And they say, and just so we don't get pushback, let's remove, for example, women of color and just say women, right? And so it's us making sure that our community remains empowered, because we've been hearing this theme of fear, right? In this conversation, we've been hearing this theme of mental health, and all of those things affect our mental health and our ability to step up and speak up what we need to say. And so really just centering the empowerment of ourselves, of our employees, of our volunteers, our partners, our community, our base, those that we serve, and making sure that people continue to feel bold and empowered to speak up and step up for what's right. And so one of the things that we've always known at Time for Change Foundation is that we can't depend on the government or anybody to save us. And I love that our founder, Dr. Kim Carter-Tillman, she always says, there's no one coming, we're it, right? And so we've always operated in a sense that we are like the things that we build, the things that we create, it's for us, by us. And we keep our community front and center. We create programs and we policy, and everything in the work that we do is all based on the people that we serve. Movement building has always been a key component of our work of, leadership development, advocacy. And we understand that people that are closest to the problem are closest to the solution. So we're lifting up the voices of those most impacted, the people that we serve. We have women in our programs that we house and provide direct services for. And so they're constantly going through leadership development, and they're learning how to speak up about different issues and policies, whether it be at the statewide legislative level, whether it be at the county level, whether it be a city council down the street, whether it be a community event where they're speaking up about different causes and issues, marches and protests and conversations like this. We're putting our women at the forefront, making sure that they're the ones that are speaking up about these, because no one can tell them what they need. They are directly impacted by some of these policies and what is currently in place now. So we have to make sure that there's no meeting about us without us, right? So we've always just served these most vulnerable populations. And traditionally, people will fight for, things that matter most to them. And so for us, it's women that have been impacted, who are fighting for their kids in the CFS systems. And, there's fast track adoption and, just issues with recidivism. And so we have to make sure that the systems that are in place are not continuously shutting people down, but we're empowering them so that they can be lifted up and they can speak up to make change.
Thank you for that, Vanessa. And we have just about 4 minutes left, and so I want to. But there's one last question. If I could give everybody 30 seconds, and sorry to do this to you, but if we could be disciplined about it to make sure everybody has a chance, just 30 seconds. What do nonprofit organizations need right now from funders, from partners, from local government, philanthropy? What do you need right now? And we'll start with you, Belinda.
Well, we first of all need to keep coming together, keep listening to one another. We need multi-year funding because we're at a critical time where we don't know, how the funding that we have right now will sustain us or be taken. So multi-year funding is super important. Trusting us to lead the way and knowing that we're taking what our communities are telling us and putting into action, helping us to be able to use funding in creative ways and powerful ways to continue this healing and this movement building, an increase in mental health funding, arts funding for cultura, and immigration support is so needed, legal. We really need to think outside the box, and we thank you for your help because this is a time for all of us to be as one.
Okay, thank you, Belinda. Cristina.
Well, I represent 2 organizations in Texas that had investigations done to them by the Attorney General. I think we're going to see unprecedented attacks, possibly by the Justice Department, against Latino organizations. And organizations need support for crisis funding to make sure that they have legal support, comm support, and that they're well organized for when, not if these assaults come, I think when these assaults come.
Thank you. Leo.
Listen, I'll be real. We need funding. We need Gen Op support, right? Like philanthropy is waiting to see what happens. Meanwhile, organizations on the ground are moving and making things happen. I'm thankful to the LCF for really putting your money where your mouth is and jumping out to give orgs like ours funding early in the year to do what we do. But philanthropy needs to see the time to act is now. Action is needed now because our gente are in the streets. We're out here making things happen, defending our rights and protecting our futures. And so what we need is Gen Op support to make sure that we can be here for the rest of the year and for the years to come, because we're going to be here past this administration. We're going to be here past this crisis to face the future. And we need support to make that happen.
Thank you, Leo. Masih.
I would say supporting the Latino community in California is like supporting the health of the state, just as supporting the immigrant community in California is supporting the foundation of the state. And so every issue, whether it's housing, healthcare, food assistance, education, economic justice, workers' rights, democracy, they're all Latino issues, they're all immigrant issues. So at this time, don't shy away from supporting organizations that are serving the Latino community, the immigrant community. Be bold and give more than you've ever given before, because we aren't seeing the support that we saw in the first Trump administration, but the attacks are much, much worse.
Thank you, Masih. Vanessa.
I'm gonna just follow the theme of everyone on here. Unrestricted multi-year funding is critical, especially in the times that we're in right now. I'm gonna ask for people to show up. There's an African proverb that I was reminded of: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So we need to continue to show up for each other, be there for each other. Post what we're posting, resharing it, social media. Let's use that as a tool. Talk to your friends and family about us. Talk to people, connect us to other people that might want to support the work that we're doing. And just trust that what we're doing is making a lasting impact. It's not just for us, but it's for the future to come.
Thank you, Vanessa, Masih, Leo, Cristina, and Belinda for joining us. Thank you even more for the work that you and your organizations are doing. I also want to thank each and every one of you for watching and for being a part of this 100 Days of Latino Resilience to mark and assess 100 days of the Trump administration. Please get involved, show solidarity, do something, be a part of making things better for especially the most vulnerable. The Latino Community Foundation is proud to do its part. Thank you for doing yours.